I-beams. I-beams, bro. I-beams, bro. Beams. Twin traction beams. TTB. Stuff like that. So. Here we go. Selena beam episode. Put on this trusty steed here. There we go. So JP, the owner of this thing, we had a LSK race kit on it before, or not on it, but we were going to install a LSK race kit on this thing. We got all the way to the point of like starting to beef up the cross member, you know, and strengthen things. And then, you know, we were building the back at the same time, and the back's got 35 inches of travel, and it's like, it just didn't make sense that we were putting all the effort into like making a big gnarly chassis and, you know, big fuel cell and big shocks, and we had a kit up front that would only do 16 inches of travel. So, you know, we kicked around the idea of I-beams for, you know, probably a couple weeks, and that's all it took. And then, you know, we just decided to kind of pull the trigger on this thing. You know, the real turning point where I signed off on it was, you know, I took a measurement of the frame rails, you know, from inside to inside of a Bronco frame rail, because Broncos are, you know, this is what they run factory. So I took that measurement, and it was within 3/4 of an inch, and I was like, wow, that's like too good to be true. So that solidified our decision on running beams. These are a Cho beam. They're a fully fabricated unit the Andrew Cho produces. They are built for a Bronco. This is a factory, just Dana 44 end on it. We're gonna do upgraded spindles and hubs and brakes, but right now this works for mock-up. It's not gonna be different geometry or anything. You can see there is some kind of like just weird mock-up stuff we have for the shock tabs, you know, and the mounts there, but all that's gonna change. We're just trying to find a relative location for it. But as far as the swap goes, this thing, we put a lot of time into the cross member and getting the up travel that we wanted. Part of the, you know, the struggle with running a four-wheel drive beam on an off-road truck or a pre-runner is this pumpkin. This pumpkin wants to go up, and it always crashes into the frame, and there's never the right amount of up travel on those things. So that was our first thing. We got all the dimensions, you know, from a factory Ford Bronco, and we built a cross member here, and you can see it's tailored to the oil pan. So everything's tight, but it doesn't move. It's all solid motor mounts. You can see built-in motor mounts. And this whole thing, this pumpkin bumps into here. So from ride height, it's got 12 inches of up travel, you know, on a four-wheel drive beam, which is pretty good. And, you know, what's nice is we had the kind of blank canvas to build that cross member and notch the frame to where it works. But you can see that whole cross member is one piece in there, and it picks up on the passenger side beam, and then we also have the driver side beam pivot. So all that stuff was fabricated on the truck, and then it was welded on the table and put back on. But, you know, this is tailored to this vehicle, so there is no, you know, no way you could swap anything out on here. I mean, you could probably put an LS in here, but that's it. Nothing, it wouldn't fit anything else. We're running a really big shock package on the front. Four-wheel drive beams are a lot of unsprung weight, so I feel comfortable running a 4.5 inch bypass. The scale of this thing is pretty big. 16 inch stroke, piggyback reservoir with a 3 inch coilover, same as the rear, except that's a 14 inch stroke. Both of these are running fin reservoirs. Obviously the piggyback lives here. We have most of the shock mount done on this side. It's all tailored to fit the shocks. And then the remote reservoir will probably be on some sort of a cross member. So this thing cycles really good. It cycles 24 inches. We have steering that's all custom for it. That'll be another episode when I put the box on and the tie rods on. The radius arm mounts are integrated into the chassis, same as the rear 4-link mounts. Everything's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It just opens up and it's flush. There's no weird box stuff hanging off the sides or off the bottom. Everything's kind of just flushed in, so you can see in line. It's all boxed and pocketed. You can see the radius arms are just a little tube chingaderas here with a gusset, the standoff and everything. This is just a mock-up unit. So what we have is Marcel, my SolidWorks guy, drew a big boxed unit that'll go in here that kind of speaks the same language as the beam, kind of angular, a lot of plate work. So those are ready to be welded and put in. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. Things to look forward to on the front as far as suspension goes. Obviously the bypass and coilover mount needs to be replicated to the passenger side. Then we still have bump stops that need to go in. So the bump stops will locate right where this junction is. They'll hang out a little bit. When this thing bumps, there's kind of ample room here. This coilover, I mean, there's still space, but the coilover, when the suspension goes up, it actually comes out. So there's a good amount of room here. This is as close as it's going to get, so we can fit a bump in here. I want to hang it kind of low and have the strike pad be hidden like back behind here on the beam, on the back of the beam. We have spindles that we're going to put on. So we're going to do some Hollander Motorsports spindles with a big brake kit with like a Willwood 4-piston caliper. So we'll be covering all the steering stuff on another episode. Part of the front build here to look forward to, all of the cutout that's on the Firewall. Ooh, that's another thing we need to cover. But all the cutout on the Firewall is not just to be able to get into the junctions, but this is actually the clearance for the 40-inch tire at bump and at lock. So what I mean by that is just when the suspension goes all the way compressed, where the bump stop is collapsed, and lock meaning that the tire is fully turned as much as it can be, both left and right. So when that thing's up there, this is all the room that we needed to fit that tire. So we're going to sheet metal all that back in. Obviously we'll final weld all the stuff that's root passed here. And address anything that we need to get inside of all this area. It's pretty tight quarters. And then one more thing that I want to cover here is our cantilever setup. So again, we wanted to stress using all of the factory components, or at least as many as we can. We did bail on the ABS system, but what happens here is running your your brake reservoir out of the brake booster. It's a pretty long situation, and that dives right into the coilover. So what we have here, it's kind of dusty, but this is a 1-to-1 cantilever system. So when the brake pedal is deployed, it pushes on this cantilever in a way here. Let's see. Pushes on the cantilever in a way where it just pushes, it pushes out one way and it pushes in this way. And our our reservoir is actually mounted in the cab here. So you see it in there, it's kind of tight. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have a cap on top that makes this a remote fill. So we're not doing, heinous stuff with a funnel trying to get under the dash and all that. Well, this thing can be serviceable and you can remove it if this thing fails or it needs to be replaced. But we'll actually have a fill for it outside, in the wiper cowl area. You can see that part of the chassis has a removable, like a tube connector section here, just a really short run, and that's to run the factory wiper mechanism just to get it in and out. So, you know, without having to like cut any of the casting off this thing or relocate it. Like I said, we're trying to just really stress using all the factory stuff as much as we can. And that's just one of those things we needed to do, where we can take that part off and we can get the whole wiper mechanism out of there. So that sums up the I-beam portion of Selena. If you guys have questions or, you know, comments, let me know below. Or just get a hold of me, you know, via Instagram or whatever. And if there's something you want me to cover, you know, more in depth, I have no problem doing that. I hope you enjoy, and talk to you later.